Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebekah Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom.
In our top story, U.S. President Donald Trump is fed up with Hamas and has given the Iranian-backed terror group a firm deadline to release all of the remaining hostages. President Trump was outraged by the physical condition of 3 recently released hostages held by the terror group in Gaza for 491 days. The 3 men were reportedly kept in tunnels and starved for the duration of their captivity. They returned traumatized and emaciated, and when he saw footage of their release, President Trump said they look like Holocaust survivors. Last week, Hamas announced that it was postponing the release of the remaining hostages indefinitely, and President Trump responded by giving the terror group 5 days to release every single hostage. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu immediately convened the Security Council. It unanimously agreed that if the hostages are not released by President Trump's Saturday deadline, the ceasefire will end and the IDF will return to intense fighting until Hamas is completely defeated.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed President Trump's vision for a future without Hamas. Netanyahu addressed the Knesset after his historic meeting with Trump at the White House. He said they both see eye to eye on Israel's war goals, including the total destruction of Hamas and the return of all the hostages. President Trump has officially rejected the so-called Palestinian right of return to Gaza. Trump is committed to building beautiful and safe communities outside of Israel for the 1.8 million residents of Gaza, saying they will be much better off starting over somewhere else. He believes that regional stability could be achieved by turning the war-torn Gaza Strip into the Riviera of the Middle East. Prime Minister Netanyahu stressed that this vision for peace can only be achieved after Hamas is removed from power so that a terror state will not be established in Gaza or anywhere on Israel's borders.
Incoming U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee believes that President Trump will bring changes of biblical proportions to the Middle East. The former governor of Arkansas told Fox News that the first change will be the total annihilation of the Iranian-backed Hamas terror group. Huckabee said Hamas wants the destruction of the Jewish state, and as long as it exists, there is a threat to Israel. Huckabee praised President Trump for his bold move in proposing the relocation of Gazans so that the coastal enclave can be completely rebuilt. He said the Trump administration will achieve something of biblical proportions in the Middle East.
Teams of investigators in the U.S. have been working around the clock to find out where American taxpayer money has been going. Among other things, they discovered that billions of dollars were spent propping up radical Islamist causes and regimes. Their finding proves that the administration of Joe Biden effectively weaponized U.S. aid by funding anti-Israel and anti-American interests around the world. Investigators reported that after the October 7th massacre in Israel, U.S. aid sent more than $2.1 billion to Gaza, while the Biden White House withheld weapons from the Jewish state as it fought wars on 7 fronts. According to the Jewish News Syndicate, U.S. aid funneled $9.3 billion to Islamic states collectively responsible for killing over 3,000 American soldiers. It also worked to destabilize Israel by sending massive amounts of cash to countries at war with the Jewish state. The findings indicate that at least $8 billion was spent bolstering Iranian proxy regimes in Iraq, Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon.
Palestinian Authority terror leader Mahmoud Abbas made headlines last week when he claimed that he was canceling pay-to-slay stipends for terrorists. This program has encouraged bloodshed in Israel for decades by offering hero status and monthly salaries to terrorists for killing Jews. The Palestinian Authority has invested millions in inciting and radicalizing Arabs throughout Judea and Samaria, leaving the Palestinian government teetering on the verge of bankruptcy. Abbas's announcement came just days before U.S. courts are set to implement penalties of up to $300 million against the PA in lawsuits filed by terror victims and their families. Israeli media was quick to report that Abbas has no intention of halting the terror payments, but is having them diverted through a third party. All recipients of the blood money were immediately assured that they will continue to receive their monthly stipends without discrimination. In 2018, President Trump signed the Taylor Force Act into law, prohibiting the United States from transferring any aid to the Palestinian Authority until it halts all payments to terrorists. Abbas has requested that President Trump repeal this law and reinstate millions of dollars in funding to the incompetent Palestinian Authority.
Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar announced that Jerusalem is following Washington, D.C.'s lead and will withdraw from the United Nations Human Rights Council. Sa'ar said the UNHRC has traditionally protected human rights abusers by allowing them to hide from scrutiny, while at the same time the nefarious UN agency obsessively demonizes the only democracy in the Middle East. Sa'ar noted that Israel is the only country with a dedicated item on the UNHRC agenda. He added that the biased council has issued more than 100 condemnations against the Jewish state. This is more than all of the resolutions against Iran, Cuba, North Korea, and Venezuela combined. Sa'ar accused the United Nations Human Rights Council of attacking Israel and propagating anti-Semitism instead of promoting human rights. He said Israel will not accept this discrimination any longer.
The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has unveiled its newest fortified missile facility for naval warfare. A representative with the IRGC told Iranian state television that the new systems can arm and fire missiles from hundreds of kilometers away and can hit targets far out to sea. Iran also unveiled a newly developed cruise missile, which it claims has anti-jamming capabilities and a range of over 1,000 kilometers. The rogue Islamic Republic continues to orchestrate attacks on Western ships sailing through the strategic Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. It is also working to bolster its proxy armies, waging war against the Jewish state while it races toward nuclear breakout. President Trump has taken a hard stance against the radical Shiite regime, saying that while he would prefer a diplomatic solution, he will not hesitate to blow Iran to smithereens.
South Africa is finally paying the price for supporting terror. U.S. President Donald Trump announced devastating aid cuts to the country for its aggressive positions that include reinvigorating its relationship with Iran and accusing Israel, rather than Hamas, of genocide. South Africa has been leading the charge in the International Court of Justice to prosecute Israelis for war crimes in Gaza. And now it has joined a coalition of anti-Israel and anti-American nations calling for an arms embargo against the Jewish state. The White House released a statement saying, as long as South Africa continues to support bad actors on the world stage, the United States will stop aid and assistance to the country. President Trump also signed an executive order sanctioning the International Criminal Court at The Hague for engaging in illegitimate and baseless actions targeting America and its close ally, Israel.
The Jewish population of Judea and Samaria is growing at twice the rate of Israel's general population. Beit El Institutions has released its annual report on the population of the biblical heartland, which shows that Jewish communities grew 2.33% in 2024. Yaakov Katz, a former member of Knesset and a founder of the community of Beit El, authored the report. He said the incredible growth in Judea and Samaria is not just a statistic. It is a living testament to the resilience and determination to restore Jewish sovereignty to all parts of our historic homeland.
U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order calling for the establishment of an Office of Faith in the White House. He also announced the appointment of Pastor Paula White Cain to lead this important initiative. She served as an advisor to President Trump during his first term and has been actively involved in faith-based diplomacy. Her biblical knowledge has given her incredible insight, and President Trump fondly calls Paula White Cain his pastor.
Jews around the world recently celebrated the holiday of Tu B'Shvat. This festival is observed on the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Shvat and celebrates the new year for trees. The Bible commands Jews to eat fruit from trees 3 years and older, so rabbis created a date to calculate the beginning of the agricultural cycle. This also applies to biblical tithes, including the offering of first fruits, or the bikurim, and the compulsory produce donation to the Levites, the widows, and the poor. Tu B'Shvat is meant to honor God's creation and to show appreciation for the world around us. It has become known as the Israeli Arbor Day and is marked by planting trees throughout the Jewish state. Many Jews observe the custom of holding a Tu B'Shvat Seder, or festive meal, that includes blessings on the fruits of the land of Israel.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. We're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is David Yaari. He is the vice chair of Keren Kayemeth LeIsrael and the president of the General Zionist Party. David, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, Joe.
David, tell our viewers a little about what is Keren Kayemeth?
Keren Kayemeth is Jewish National Fund, set up in 1901 by Theodor Herzl at the Fifth Zionist Congress to basically reclaim the land of Israel. So what they did was they raised money from Jews around the world and anyone who wanted to contribute, and they bought back the land. And so for the last 120 years now, Keren Kayemeth owns 13% of the land of Israel and runs the forest and is the environmental organization of the State of Israel.
It's a very powerful organization, but it's one of 4 organizations that are national organizations. Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. So the World Zionist Congress, which was set up in 1897 by Herzl, was set up to be the political arm to bring back the Jewish people to our homeland. And through that time, they set up 4 institutions. The first one was the Congress itself and the World Zionist Organization. The second one in 1901 was Keren Kayemeth, because they needed a vehicle to reclaim the land. The third was the Jewish Agency, which many people have heard of, which helped resettle Jews who came in and went out around the world. And that was the government within the government. David Ben-Gurion was the head of that, and then he became the prime minister. And the president of the World Zionist Organization was Chaim Weizmann, who was also the president of our party back in the time. And the fourth one, as you may know, is Keren HaYesod. Keren HaYesod is basically a fundraising vehicle for people to raise funds for great projects in Israel.
You're also the president of the General Zionist Party, which has a rich history. Can you tell us about that?
So the General Zionist Party, which sounds like a vanilla party because it's everything, is in many respects is that. It's the place where if you're looking for a home to connect to Israel, this is your party. We don't get caught up in narrow agendas. We don't get caught up in divergent religious agendas or political agendas in Israel. We're a party that's focused around the world. So all of our delegates are from Argentina, the United States, and Denmark, and the UK, and Russia, and Ukraine. So we have delegates who come from around the world who care about Israel. And their number one priority is how can we strengthen the connection between Jewish communities and others outside of Israel to connect to Israel. That's our core mission, and we do it through a handful of different projects.
What's really interesting about all these organizations is that the leadership is actually chosen by world Jewry and Israeli Jews as well in a big, giant month or 2-month long election. Can you tell us about this process?
I think this is the best kept secret because the reality is most people don't know that this election happens. And this election happens every 5 years. The Zionist Congress originally happened every year. And now every 5 years, Jewish people from around the world gather in Jerusalem and they come as equals. It's the only democratically elected platform in the world where Jews, whether they're living in Israel or living outside of Israel, come and sit as equals, and then they discuss the issues of the day. And it's the only platform as well that's thinking not just about Israel or not just about the communities where they come from, but thinking about the world.
Well, most of our viewers are Bible-believing Christians, and Christians are the strongest support of Israel. I think it's not debatable anymore that our best friends around the world are actually Bible-believing Christians. So how do they get involved with these major institutions?
First of all, anybody who doesn't appreciate the role and the important partnership between the Jewish people and people who are Christian around the world misses the biblical narrative. Right? This is where our destinies are intertwined. We have a responsibility to build and strengthen Israel and let it be a light into the nations and work and repair the world together. That's our mission. And so the fact that people are doing it, we need to figure out how to outstretch our hands and engage. But so many people are doing amazing work, and we need to be more appreciative and thankful. And I will share one thing with you that I think you know is that we need to create the constructs, and I'm happy to do it with you and others, where we have a matching capacity. We're Kakal, we now have the largest asset base of any Jewish organization in the world. And we're controlling the lands of Israel, and we do a lot of work with the churches as well. And so those who are familiar know it. We need to find ways to partner, and I'm happy to figure out how to get that message across. People who have great projects can come here, and we can find matching for those projects.
I've seen that since October 7th that Israelis are really appreciative of Christian support all over the world. This is really the first time the Jewish people weren't alone. We had tens of thousands and even millions of people around the world standing with Israel like never before. What did that mean to Jewish organizations when they saw that outpouring of support?
I think every Jewish community around the world that has felt in the embrace is tremendously appreciative. But when we're sitting here in Israel and surrounded by enemies who clearly want to kick us out of our country, to see the warmth and the visits that have happened here, there's nothing more gratifying. Seeing Christian visitors visiting the holy sites and standing with us and standing with Israel is one of the most powerful, supportive messages we can have.
I see that you're wearing the pin of Israel and Paraguay. Paraguay just moved their embassy to Jerusalem just a month and a half ago. This is a great example of faith-based diplomacy when Christians get involved with the political process. Why is it important to you?
I personally, anybody who's willing to come and move their embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people and stand with us, I want to wear their pin. So when the president of Paraguay, and we had the pleasure of hearing him speak at the Knesset together, that was one of the more inspiring moments, to see people who come who understand their place in history and can stand there in the seat of government in Israel and say, we stand with you. And we don't just stand with you now, but we stand with you forever because our mission is together. We need to stand back with them. And so that's the nature of what needs to happen in our diplomacy.
David, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
So first of all, thank you. Thank you for standing with us. And the second pin I'm wearing is a pin to recall our hostages and bring them home. And thank you for standing with us and fighting to bring them back home to our country. We'll never forget your support. And secondly, please feel free to reach out to us. We want to be partners, and we can be partners to build the next great wave of Zionists in the world. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now, the truth from Zion.
The United Nations clearly has a problem. It has failed miserably when it comes to dealing with Iran. The fanatic Shiite regime funnels millions of dollars into propping up terror groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran terrorizes its own population and robs them of freedoms and basic human rights. Yet the United Nations does not stand up to the leaders of Iran. In fact, it gives them legitimacy by offering this radical Islamic theocracy roles within the UN that impact global society. Women in Iran are fighting for basic rights, and they are at risk of death if they violate strict Sharia religious law. And yet Iran was a member of the United Nations Women's Rights Commission. The regime entered the commission in 2021, but was removed due to wide-scale protests from watchdog groups and individuals. They pressured the UN to hold a vote regarding Iran's status on the commission. The measure to remove Iran from the delegation passed by a margin of 29-8, the first time the commission has ever taken such action. In the last election held in 2021, Iran's Guardian Council, appointed by Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, disqualified prominent candidates. This ensured that presidential incumbent Ibrahim Raisi would have an easy victory. When Iran implemented its new hijab legislation, the UN called it gender apartheid, but took no meaningful action. The new Iranian law imposes even longer prison sentences and higher monetary penalties for women who do not comply with the country's strict Islamic dress code. In September 2022, the tragic death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini brought to light the harsh reality that Iranian women face on a daily basis. Amini was arrested by the morality police for not covering her hair properly. She was beaten to death by police while in custody. Just over a year later, the United Nations appointed Iran to chair the UN Human Rights Forum. The role of this two-day conclave was to discuss human rights, democracy, and the rule of law where countries can work to protect individuals from discrimination and ensure equal access to justice for all. The move drew harsh criticism from politicians and diplomats around the world. Calls to overturn Iran's chairmanship of the Human Rights Forum were ignored. The meeting was held as scheduled, but very few member states attended. The only speakers to participate were from China, Cuba, and Venezuela. U.S. Representative Claudia Tenney tweeted that naming Iran as chair of the UN Human Rights Forum is like calling an arsonist to put out a fire. She added that it shows just how broken the Human Rights Council is today. The move highlights broader concerns about Iran's approach to human rights. The United Nations as an organization was founded on the principles of human rights and equality, and yet has not dealt with Iran for its mass persecution of demonstrators. Nearly 20,000 people were arrested during protest in support of women's rights and public freedom. Human rights groups claim more than 500 people were killed during the violent suppression of demonstrations.
And today, unfortunately, with these awful, unbelievable violations of the basic human rights in Iran, and when most of the people of Iran are ready and want the change of the regime, the West keeps speaking about engaging with the regime, appeasing the regime, and not fighting against this regime.
Sadly, demands that Iranian authorities end their crackdown and deliver justice and accountability fell on deaf ears. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action Accord, or JCPOA, allowed Iran to work on its nuclear program under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. But when UN monitors traveled to Iran, they were not permitted to inspect nuclear facilities. The UN responded by doing nothing. Iran's nuclear program is a matter of grave concern for global security. However, the international community routinely acts ambivalently about the idea of Iran possessing nuclear weapons. The UN shows little concern regarding the threat posed by the Islamic Republic of Iran, but is obsessed with the Jewish state. So much so that the UN Human Rights Council established an unprecedented and permanent commission of inquiry to delegitimize Israel. The organization always reviews and criticizes Israel at every meeting. Iran, which beats and poisons women for peacefully protesting, does not have a standing agenda. Only Israel is singled out in this obviously biased manner. It's time for the United Nations to live up to its founding principles and hold those who violate human rights accountable. Up next, the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
ICEJ is passionate about offering practical help and life-changing opportunities to those in need in every sector of Israeli society. Since Israel's war with Hamas began, Israeli citizens have been negatively impacted economically, with many business owners losing more than 50% of their monthly income. This makes it difficult to keep their business afloat and to provide for their families. Government compensation offers insufficient relief for small businesses, many that are operated by women. The situation is even more complicated for those evacuated from their homes, far away from their customer base. To help alleviate these challenges, the ICEJ is sponsoring business mentorship and giving grants to help small businesses succeed, even in these challenging times.
אז נעים מאוד, אני אלישבע שוק. אז העסק שלי התחיל בצורה מאוד מעניינת. לפני 3 שנים השתנו לי החיים. עברתי רשלנות רפואית בלידה, וכתוצאה מזה הייתי ממש נכה. ואז בעלי אמר לי, את שוכבת במיטה בבית, במצב כל כך מוכשרת, ואת לא עושה את מה שאת בעצם טובה בו, בואי בעצם תקומי ותפתחי עסק. אז החלטתי לפתוח את העסק בנושא הזה של השיווק והפרסום דווקא במגזר החרדי. כאילו של עסקים מהמגזר הכללי, לשווק מהמגזר החרדי, בשפה ובפלטפורמה שמתאימה למגזר החרדי. אחרי שפתחנו אותו, העסק ממש התחיל ליפול, ופתאום קפצה לי פרסומה של יוזמות עתיד, והגעתי לקורס שלהם, ושם בעצם למדתי מאפס איך להקים את העסק, וזה היה מדהים. במשך הזמן פשוט העסק התחיל לגדול ולגדול ולגדול, ואז הגיע 7 באוקטובר. כמו כולם אני הייתי בשוק. משבוע אחרי אני מתחילה לקבל טלפונים מכל הלקוחות ומהלקוחות הגדולים שלי, שמודים שהם מקפיאים את זה, כי השיווק והפרסום במגזר החרדי פשוט לא התקדם, אף אחד לא עסק בזה בכלל, הרגשנו שסוף העולם הגיע. פניתי עוד פעם ליוזמות עתיד, והם סיפרו לי על התוכנית הבראה שיש להם, והגעתי לתוכנית הבראה שלהם, קיבלתי מנטורית מהממת, שנפגשנו, שיחות מאוד ארוכות, ישבנו על העסק, ניתחנו אותו, מה עכשיו, איך אנחנו לוקחים את הסיטואציה הנוכחית, והופכים אותה לרווחית בשבילי. ואני יכולה להגיד לך שעבר חצי שנה מאז, והעסק שלי במקום מהמם. הוא לא כמו שהוא היה באוגוסט, אבל הוא במקום מהמם, ויש לי לקוחות חדשים שלא הייתי חולמת להגיע אליהם אם לא המלחמה. וככל שהזמן עובר, אני רק מגיעים עוד ועוד לקוחות כתוצאה מהלקוחות החדשים האלה. באמת, התוכנית ההבראה הביאה אותי לזווית מסוימת שלא חשבתי בכלל להגיע איתה עם העסק. אז בהתחלה כשהתחילה המלחמה וראיתי את כל ההייט מסביב, זה היה נורא, אתה מרגיש גם שכאילו, רגע, הארץ הזאת היא של כולם בסופו של דבר. למה אתם כולם יוצאים עלינו? אתם רוצים לשמור עליה גם. ואז אתה מתחילה לשמוע את כל אתה מתחיל לשמוע את האנשים מסביב, את ההפגנות תמיכה שהיה לישראל, את האנשים שרוצים לתרום ולתת דווקא לעסקים. וזה פשוט מחמם את הלב, זה מראה כאילו אנשים גם תומכים בנו, גם בשעות הקשות והנוראיות האלה. זה נותן הרגשה כל כך חמה וכל כך, כאילו, בעצם, הארץ הזאת היא של כולם. זה ארץ שכאילו בעצם היא קדושה לכולנו, וזה פשוט מדהים לראות את התמיכה שיש מסביב.
Since 1980, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem has been a voice of Christian support for Israel and connected the global church to the land of the Bible. Headquartered in Jerusalem, the ICEJ has taken action to stand with Israel by caring for Holocaust survivors, helping Jewish families return home to Israel, providing bomb shelters, fighting anti-Semitism around the world, and by inviting Christians to discover Israel for themselves. After Hamas brutally attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, the ICEJ has been actively standing with Israel and her people through advocacy and urgently needed aid projects. Now is the time for Christians to turn their love for Israel and the Jewish people into real action as never before. Your donation will help deliver bomb shelters to at-risk areas, provide necessary supplies for first responders, support affected citizens with trauma care, and will eventually help rebuild these devastated communities. Visit ICEJUSA.tv to donate online or call 1-800-910-6355 and give your generous gift today.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebekah Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.